have Phil Penman here, and I'm so excited because I love his work, and you're going to love his work. You've probably seen a lot of his work. He's a street photographer, a photojournalist, um, and maybe because he's not from New York, he sees New York in a way that us natives don't necessarily see it, and done some remarkable work. And also during the pandemic, he's done a lot of remarkable work. And I hope he promotes himself, but in case he doesn't, he has a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous coffee table book of his work put out by Glitterati Press called Street. And if you love books, and everyone should love books, I promote books. Everyone should be collecting photography books. And this is a book you want in your collection. It's amazing. So without further ado, Phil Penman.
Bill, I want to thank you so much for joining us. And if you've been watching today, I always ask our guests one question to start this off with. And you're in the most intimate.
Who are you?
Yeah, who the hell are you?
Right.
No, today is all about the photography. So I want to know, in the most intimate way, not a generic way, what is photography to you?
Pretty much everything. Like started printing black and white in the darkroom, got addicted to it. It's my stress reliever. You know, it's everything. If I'm ever stressed or maxed out, I'll go out and buy a coffee and just walk around with my camera for a few hours, even if I don't take a picture, just to be out there. It just clears your head. Or seeing something that, you know, you think that you're going through something bad and you see someone else, and it just grounds you as well. So yeah, it's everything.
That's wonderful. Are you going to be sharing the screen with us?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So normally we hold questions at the end. Is that something you want to do, or as they come in, or?
No, if someone has a question, fire away.
Awesome. So in the Q&A panel, everybody, there is obviously a Q&A panel. Throw your questions there, and we'll ask them as they come in. And the screen is all yours.
Great. So for those that don't know, I've been a street photographer for, I don't know, well, in New York for about 20 years. But I've been a news photographer since I was 18. And that involved all kinds of stuff. I started in local newspapers, hard news, corporate work. And then I came over to the States in 2000, and I was working primarily for like the British newspapers, but I got to travel the world, paid for by someone else, which was nice, but doing a lot of hard news stories, covered the 2000, you know, the 9/11 attacks, covered that, and then went through all of that. And that's all I've been doing pretty much. I did a lot of celebrity work as well. One of the things of being a photographer is that you have to be versatile. So I never really just stuck to one thing. So without further ado, you know, we've kind of been going through historical events, and let me just see. This is kind of how I think a lot of us have been living, in a bubble for a while now. This was shot in Times Square. It was believe it or not, it was a music video shoot. And apparently the woman inside that is a celebrity, but I don't know who it is. I hate to say. Kind of, after taking myself out of the celebrity world, I kind of stopped caring about it all. But I just thought that, like, the shot itself was very telling. Great creative idea from the crew that came up with this, I thought, and very timely. So, you know, why everything's been going on, I kind of decided, well, you know, I'm working for the British papers, and we're witnessing history with the pandemic that's hit and how it's changing all our lives. And I learned a lot of things from a lot of mistakes that I made during 2000 with the 9/11 attacks, things that I didn't photograph that I've come to realize do have importance. So one of the things that I would shoot a lot of are newspapers, kind of like the headlines of the day. So whenever I would walk around now, I kind of know to look for certain things that might not seem so important at the time, but maybe 20, 30 years from now, they're going to stand out. Those that were kind of walking around, we as news photographers, there are certain angles that papers are going to go for, or media outlets. And one of the stories was obviously very desolate New York streets. So this was Fifth Avenue, I believe in March, early April. And I just thought I was stood in the street for maybe about 5 minutes without having to worry about any cars. And I remember there was a security guard that was on the street who was just looking at me, watching me taking pictures. And we both kind of realized that there were no cars coming, which is very rare for Fifth Avenue, as you know. And, as a news photographer, you're trying to build up a story. So, what's going to be telling. Sometimes you've got to get a feature, which might be a combination of images. And sometimes you need an image that just kind of tells all location, what's going on. So this was, for me, coming to New York on holiday in '94, one of the first things I remember was going on the Staten Island ferry, and the very iconic, just coming in and seeing the towers. So I wanted to kind of go and see how things were on the ferry. So I went on, and there were maybe a couple of people. And for me, this was a very telling shot with the Statue of Liberty behind and just one guy kind of sleeping. And there were only maybe a handful of people on the ferry at the time. This was on Madison Avenue. I was walking around. Normally, this is a kind of shot that I like to do anyway. And normally I'm trying to wait for people not to be on the street. This particular shot, I was stood there for, 15, 20 minutes, and I saw one person. And they literally came up, looked at their reflection in the door, and then walked away, which was kind of weird. This is another thing that I'm looking for, is street signs, things that are encouraging, the sign that was on the cinema. So little things like this, it's more of a feature-y image. So you would be putting this together with a combination of other images. Again, a feature type image, a shot that I've done before, but again, I was kind of waiting for the area to be clear. And again, with this one, I was waiting for about 15 minutes for someone to walk by so I could get this image. This is kind of an example of using street signs around you to kind of tell a story, but without. So, watching for pedestrians is kind of like a double meaning, that there are no pedestrians walking around. And this is kind of another example of something that I've learned to do now, looking for little things that are kind of telling, the fact that now we have to worship online. This is all, to me, it's all very temporary, but it's things that you kind of have to capture, because they are going to go away, and things like this are going to change. But maybe 20 years from now, we're going to look back at this. Again, it's kind of like telling the mood, 10th Avenue. And then little things, this was walking around Soho. So a lot of the time when I'm shooting, while I was covering all of this, one of the things that I was having to be very careful and very cautious of is not being near any people. Also, because the building that I live in, there's a lot of people. It's 3,000 people. I have to be very cautious about when I come back into the building as well. So a lot of my shooting would be going out at 3, 4 a.m. in the morning, shooting for maybe 5 hours, coming back in through the garage. Obviously, even back then, fully masked up, make sure I'm not touching anything. But looking for this was down in Soho, and kind of looking for, the way that people are capturing what's going on. I had to do, during this time, I'd be getting a lot of assignments from British papers to cover different angles. So one of the things was kind of how people were ignoring social distancing. Like everyone, every day, the news is traveling so quick, and they're just looking for whatever the latest headline is. So one of the stories I had to do was go out to the Hamptons, and it was like looking for people, rich people, that were ignoring social distancing because that was the angle that the paper were going for. And then there'll be other stories that I'm having to look out for. But at the same time, you can find yourself caught in this cycle of chasing the day-to-day headlines. And inevitably, what happens is you miss the more subtle stories like this. This was out in New Jersey, just when I was going to buy some groceries, and just like a small sign like this in front of someone's house. And this is not something that a newspaper is going to tell you to go and look for, but this is, to me, I don't know, to me, it carries more historical weight, an image like this, than a bunch of golfers that are ignoring social distancing. So you have to be very wary that you're not just ignoring shooting images like these. Even something like this is on 42nd Street, and we see this kind of like quite a bit, but it's the fact that you've got this rat that's just so blatantly running around on 42nd Street, and there are no pedestrians. Even like walking around in Grand Central was just so foreign because nobody was around. This is a shot I did in Brooklyn, and it was, I believe, during Passover week. And I'd been there like a couple of days before, and the newspapers were trying to get us to go out there and shoot pictures of like the mass gatherings and the funerals that were going on. I wasn't really too interested in that. It was more like I wanted to see how they were going to continue, you know, their respecting their religious beliefs during this time. So one of the things that was very strange to me was just how much, I still don't comprehend it, was just how much trash was on the streets everywhere. And so I was photographing that, but then also like this is people, you know, exercising their religious beliefs on the street because they couldn't be inside the halls. And it was just an interesting shot for me, this. This was up in the Upper West Side. And it was just, you know, little signs like this, if you can see it, it says, is it just getting me or is it getting crazier out there? And a lot of the time when I'm looking for these kind of weird signs, and maybe you put it with, you know, maybe you find the right person that's walking by with the mask. This was shot out in New Jersey. And again, it was kind of like, all right, you know, I'm shooting New York, but this is not just a New York story. This is like probably one of the first stories that we're going to do where it's actually a world story and it's affecting everybody. So, you know, there's only so far that I can go. So one of the things I'd be doing is getting out in my car, driving out into New Jersey, and seeing how it was affecting different neighborhoods. This was out in, I can't remember, I think it was like Secaucus or something, but it was just how all of a sudden you have all these empty parking lots. This is grocery shopping in Wegmans, and just watching how everyone's kind of like, I think everyone was pretty good about how they were observing their, you know, their social distancing was pretty good. In the early days, it was kind of like the grocery stores, just everyone was piling in. And it was weird because they'd be saying to us, you know, don't go out in public, don't do this. And then you go in a grocery store and there's hundreds of people everywhere, all on top of each other, touching everything. And it wasn't, I think, for like until like a month later that they finally started saying, well, actually, you've got to limit how many people you go in. You know, there was like this learning curve of, you know, how we deal with this. Obviously, none of us are used to something like this. So this was it was interesting to watch. And again, it's like another, I hope we never see anything like this again. Here's another kind of example of things that I wouldn't have shot maybe 20 years ago, but now, well, maybe these things are not, but even like a cell phone message that we're looking for licensed healthcare workers, you know, that came in on my phone. And that's like a very telling thing as well. The fact that our society now is in a state where we are looking for healthcare workers because we don't have enough. I think this pandemic has kind of opened our eyes to a lot of things that we are lacking. You know, the lack of hospitals, the fact, you know, we shut down St. Vincent's so we could build condos. You know, I think a lot of things have been opened up to people about this, and the fact that we've got, you know, a lot of private hospitals now and we don't have that many public. So this was in the Oculus. And this one is probably one of the scariest pictures I've taken, because I've gone into the Oculus quite a lot, because it's just, for all of us, it's an incredible place to go and photograph. But to see all these people coming off the train all wearing masks, that was really scary to me. And it's like, you know, it's very stark in there anyway. It's very contrasty. So I shot this pretty contrasty, and you just got these dark silhouettes with the white masks coming too. I don't know, that one to me was kind of, I don't know, pretty graphic. So during these first few months, this was kind of what I'd worked on. I wanted to put together this feature, and, you know, I was doing the stuff for like all the British papers, but again, like I was saying, it's very timely, matter of fact, you know, here are desolate streets. That's the story. You know, Italy was the story for a while. I'm doing all of that, but at the same time, I'm trying to build up a feature as well that I can pitch for myself. Something, you know, this was a pitch that I did to the New York Review of Books, where it's my story. I write the copy, I put together the feature, and it can be your point of view. So this was the feature that ran in there. Again, it's like on the ferry, just nobody else around, just a woman sleeping with her mask. And then you have just, you know, these empty streets. So one of the things with, you know, I was a staffer for many years, and when you become freelance, you soon realize you've kind of got to, you've got to learn how to sell to keep yourself afloat. And one of the things I did was I took that New York Review of Books story, and then you start thinking of other ways. Well, how can I get this story to many other publications? So I pitched it to, I believe it was the Daily Mail was next. And one of the things with that was because the Daily Mail is probably one of the biggest newspapers now. It used to be, like, for me when I was growing up, it was a very middle-class English newspaper that seems to have just completely taken over the world with 200 to 300 million unique viewers a month. You get one story published on there, and it's kind of a vehicle for that story going to everyone else, because every single publication seems to, they like to look at what the Mail Online is doing because they have everything. So the Sun reached out to me because they saw it on the Mail Online, and of course, because they're competitive with each other, they said, well, we want to run it as well. One of the things you have to do is you have to be very, when you're selling to online publications, you have embargoes. So you will do like a 24-hour deal where you're giving them 24-hour rights to publish the story. And after that time, you're allowed to pitch it to other online publications or news or television, but you have to be very careful about how you sell your work. So this was the Daily Mail article, and one of the prerequisites of this was that the New York Review of Books was in the credit, because they used this within, I think it was within 24 hours of the New York Review of Books running it. So we had a condition that they could run it only if they were to mention. And we also did that with a couple of other British publications. Now, you kind of like, you're looking as a photographer, and especially as a news photographer, you kind of got to find ways to market your work. Like, one, I use the Daily Mail, which is a great vehicle to get your work out there. A lot of people, like I said, a lot of people look at it. They like to publish a lot of hard photography as well. It's not all like celebrity work. And one of the things that came from this was Al Jazeera television came to me and said that we saw your work and we want to feature you and two other photographers from around the world. So they had one guy in Italy and one guy in India, and they did a 10-minute video about how as three different photographers covering the pandemic during this time. And, you know, this is great exposure for your work. It's kind of weird to say, you know, I don't know how you put it. It's like, it's a historical event. It's not a good thing for any of us, but at the same time, it's like, you can't just say, all right, I'm not going to make any money. This is, when you're a news photographer, you are getting paid. So it's not like you're making tons of money, but you need to get your work out there and exposure. And off the back of these, I've had book publications come to me saying they want to use images for front cover of newspapers, for book covers. So, you know, it was funny, even like whilst a lot of work wasn't going on, I found myself like nonstop working. I think I had like 5,000 edited pictures just from this period. And it wasn't even just because I wanted to, you know, get these pictures in publications. It's because I know that 20 years from now, I want to look at these pictures, and these is a historical documentation. A lot of it might be like front cover of the New York Times, or it might be like, you know, that worship online sign. So it was kind of interesting. You know, this was kind of like the first story was the pandemic, and you can't just, you know, you can't just run that. And for photographers that were out there on the street, the one thing that was very evident, you know, everyone would say, you know, the streets are desolate, nothing's going on, you know, you'd see these pictures taken by photographers where you would see nothing, you know, empty streets. But in actual fact, the streets weren't empty at all. You know, here's a guy working, you know, he's walking along 42nd Street collecting cans because everyone else is inside and they're getting paid to work at home. He's still got to work outside. He's not going to stop working, you know. These guys never stopped. The construction guys, every single block had construction on it, like everywhere. And it was like you almost couldn't go down a street without seeing a construction crew either ripping up the road or putting up a building. So it was kind of like you're watching the news channel at home and you go, oh my God, no one's outside. Everyone's so afraid. And at the same time, this is what you're seeing. Guys, no masks, diggers, ripping up roads. So it's like, well, hang on a minute. What's the real story? What's going on? And I don't think I ever saw this story get exposed, to be honest. But nothing is stopping these guys from working. I couldn't get over it. Like, here's a guy painting lampposts on Madison Avenue. They had, you know, if things were so bad, they had guys all up Madison Avenue painting these lampposts. You know, they could have done this anytime, but this was kind of the story that was going on. And for me, you know, I'm looking for an angle. So one of the papers that I was working with, they were saying, well, we need another story. So I was like, well, how about we do the construction guys? And it's like, well, you know, that's okay, but it's not that interesting. So like, all right, we'll move on to the next. So for me, the most telling thing on all of this was how all of a sudden the homeless kind of came to life, in that they're not hidden in the shadows anymore. We're not walking past them, ignoring them. Now it's like in your face. You can't ignore it. Some countries dealt with it differently. We took, we let a lot of people out. We put them in hotels. But for a lot of people, if you were already homeless, you were already in the system. So if you wanted to be in a hotel, they weren't going to let you be in a hotel. The only ones that were allowed to be in the hotel were the people that were newly homeless. So this was underneath the FDR Drive. It was one of the, I was down there just like doing location scouting, believe it or not, for a commercial job. And I hadn't been down there in a while, and all of a sudden I saw this, and this guy came over to me. His name was Shamay. He's from Thailand. And he wanted to chat to me because he kind of wanted to tell his story. So, he used to be a welder. He was working in a restaurant in Chinatown, and now he found that he's homeless. So we had a good chat, and he just wanted to kind of tell me that all these people were now living under the FDR Drive. I'm not quite sure why he approached me. Maybe he wanted to tell his story, but it was interesting to me. So I started putting together there's a story here. This guy, I was walking down Broadway, and I saw this guy with this great jacket that just like fuck everything. And one of the things, when I'm doing street portraits, or if I'm looking for signs like this, and when I was photographing this guy, the sanitation crews are actually on Broadway, and they were throwing all their possessions into the back of a truck. They were clearing the street, and this guy were they were gradually moving stuff down the street. So I said to him, like, do you mind if I get a picture of your jacket, because it's a cool jacket? And he's like, well, where are you from? And I'm like, well, originally I'm from England. And he's like, yeah, but whereabouts? And I said, I'm from Dorset, South Coast. And he said, well, I'm from Dorset too. I'm from Bournemouth. And it turned out that he actually lived about 5 miles away from where I was born. And we got chatting, and he's like, no, well, don't photograph that jacket. I want you to photograph this jacket, because this is a real cool jacket. And he used to be a classical pianist. He was a model over here, and he just found himself in, hard times. And now he's living on the street. This guy is called John, and he mainly, I see him up on 10th Avenue. He's originally from New Jersey, Morris County. And I guess he's been homeless for a while. I think like 2012, he said. But believe it or not, I was actually going out just to test a new lens. And he was backing up towards me, and I saw the hat, and I just thought that the hat was very interesting, like, because I don't see very like patriotic things lately. So I love the fact that this guy has this hat. So I just said to him, do you mind if I photograph your hat? And he's like, yeah, of course. And John was actually in a wheelchair, and it was one of these cases where the shot of him in the wheelchair was kind of like, it didn't work. It was kind of like, all right, well, here's a guy in a wheelchair, I didn't really want to show that. I wanted just to show him and his hat. This lady is called Tippy. She was on 8th Avenue, and we got chatting, and she just wanted like $8 for a pair of shoes. So we got chatting. To me, it's a very hard image. It's one of these things. It's like, you walk past this a lot, And it's very, you know, it's tough. It's very tough to see. You're asking yourself, can you photograph this? But at the same time, like I posted this picture and her story on like on my Instagram. And if someone said, oh, you know, how dare you run in front of her and take this picture? And I was like, well, first off, you know, if you read the caption, you would know that her name was Tippy, and I wouldn't know her name unless I'd asked her. And the fact that it brought attention to something that wasn't being spoken about, for me, I didn't care if someone thought that I was taking advantage or it was the fact that now you're at least talking about it, because nobody's been talking about this. So the fact that you're discussing it now, for me, is a good thing. And I don't give a shit whether you think that I took this picture, because it's done its job for me. This was kind of just like where people live, you know? You walk past this every day. This was on Madison Avenue. And I just thought it was very, you know, a very telling sign. It's one of these things where the guy just happened to be walking past the sign. It was a quick shot because I turned around and saw it. And it's time to take real care of one another. This is Charlie. He's near Macy's, and we got chatting. I walked past him and I saw, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this picture or not. Went up to him, got chatting, and it's like, you know, he originally from Toronto, and I just thought, you know, for me, the US Army thing on his leg, and I asked him, and he said, yeah, no, I used to be. And there's a lot of veterans on the street, but there's also a lot that will, so a lot of the homeless people I know, they kind of give me the lowdown on how you can tell a fake and how you can't. And a lot of the time they were telling me, if someone comes up to you and they got the whole US veteran sign and all this, they said more often than not, they're a fake. They said most of the homeless people have to be a lot more creative with their signs. So I know like a guy called Mitch Man on 42nd Street, and he'll have like signs saying, you know, Trump stole my weed, or, you know, I'm trying to remember what the last one is like. Oh God, what was it? I think Trump. No, something Trump, and then there was another one about I need money for a ray gun. You know, family were abducted. So, Charlie, I saw this. I saw the sticker, and I was like, to me, I didn't need to show him. It was just this was way more impactful than showing him ever could be. This was on 42nd Street again. It's kind of like it's an area that I cover quite a lot just because I live in the area. And I've kind of watched it get worse and worse and worse over the last few months. This guy is great. So I've been living, I don't know, I've lived in Hell's Kitchen for probably 4 years now. And I would walk past this guy every single day. He sits in a chair and he's very, very intimidating. Like he's a huge guy. And this was like early on in the pandemic. And I walk past him and I always nod and I say hi. And this time he turns around at me and is like, hey, when you gonna take my picture? So I'm like, shit, okay, yeah, definitely, I'll take your picture. So we got chatting a little bit, and it was weird because like I always remember like just seeing him like kind of basking in the sun in his chair. He doesn't bother anyone, never says anything to anyone. And I'm just like scared shitless by this guy. And all of a sudden I hear him speak, and it's the polar opposite of what I'd think he would be. So I did a portrait like this, and then I said, do you mind if I do one in your chair? Because I know you as you in your chair. That's how I know you. This was kind of early pandemic days. This was kind of like when I was heading out to Brooklyn to cover the Passover, and this guy needed I had to pull him onto the train, and then I just like, again, it was like another one of those images of kind of like, you know, I don't want to show the face, I just want to kind of tell the story. And again, it was kind of like, I really don't care if anyone thinks anything of the image. It was purely, the only story I saw was the fact that people were complaining that the homeless were messing up the trains at night. You know, they don't have anywhere. All of a sudden they have a train to keep warm on. So I wanted to tell this story. And if you've noticed, a lot of the portraits and a lot of the pictures I've taken, I shoot in a particular way. I don't want to shoot them lying on the ground in their stuff. I want to chat to them. I want to photograph them from their eye level. You know, I don't want to be shooting looking down at them, because I want to show it in a certain light. I actually showed a few of my friends that are homeless before I even did the story to see what they thought of it as well, because I didn't want it to come over in a bad way. This is a guy, if any of you ever walk up Fifth Avenue, like 43rd Street, he puts all these signs on the street, and they're always very deep, meaningful signs, and he changes them up a lot. This is like across the road from where I live. A lot of the time I just photograph this doorway just because it's a cool spot. But it was just like watching how this has gotten worse and worse and worse. Again, it's kind of like a shot looking at the, you know, so they just positioned themselves there. And I actually went up to this guy and I said I wanted to photograph his mask. Again, very patriotic. So I did a couple of close-ups, and then I did this kind of shot. It was kind of like the, you know, the double meaning. So I pieced together this whole feature, and I wanted to tell it in a certain light. Again, like I said, I went to people I knew before I even published it, and I started to pitch it to the same kind of publications that I went to before. And what I found was that most of them didn't want to touch it. They didn't want to go near this story. And it's funny because I think it was this weekend that I actually saw the first story about the homeless in New York. And I think it was the Daily News that did it. And so I did this story, and it was I pitched it to all these other papers. Nobody wanted to touch it. And then the New York Review of Books, again, they saw it and they just said, well, yeah, this is a complete no-brainer. Of course we're going to do this story. You know, this is a good one to do. So we pieced together this, again, telling everyone's stories, who they were, how they ended up on the street. And it was more about, you know, them and their story, why they're in this predicament. And what's next? You know, this story just doesn't stop there, really. It's like, all right, how, you know, I guess probably a lot of you are out there photographing now. I know in the early days, not many people were going out, and it's interesting because nothing's really changed. You know, we don't have a vaccine or anything, and we're all out there now, photographing. So it's like, all right, what's, you know, how do we look for another angle? You know, I'm still doing my news stories, but it's like, all right, well, you know, what do we get that's next? You know, the masks are very telling. One of the things that I've always loved to do is photograph the characters of New York. And now it's like, you know, you got this lady here on the right who's playing a harp on the Bowery. I came around the corner and there she was just playing her harp, and I'm like, oh, come on, you know, I've got to get a portrait of this. So I went up to her and I was like, you know, do you mind if I take a picture? And she's like, yeah, of course. And I was like, you know, do you have a chain star? Like, you know, are you trying to busk? And she said, no. I had a dream, and someone told me that I should go on the streets and play my harp for everyone to hear. And she wasn't crazy at all. I have to say that she's not crazy. She just, you know, she generally said, and we've spoken since. And she just said people wanted to hear, I just wanted people to hear my music and something to be uplifting. And this guy, I love, you know, he's doesn't give a shit. I'm going to wear my best suit. Yeah, I'm going to wear a mask, but I'm going to still do it with style. This is up on Madison Avenue. You guys, you know, he's got to get his teddies out. This gentleman, this was out in Brooklyn. And it's just, you know, life goes on for people. You know, this guy's going out there. He's selling his books. And at the same time, he's like, hey, man, if you want a book, you can just take one. If you can't see it, this is a guy selling weed. So he came up to me and he was just ripped. So I was like, hey, man, do you mind if I get a picture of you with your mask on? And the next thing you know, is like he's trying to sell me some weed. So there he is with his bag. Life goes on for this guy. You know, he's got to make his money. And of course, this guy, he's not going anywhere. I think all throughout the whole time this was all going on, it's like, you know, he was out there every day and I guess he was making some money, you know, but he was like, you know, I'm not letting this stop me. This is probably one of my most fun events of the whole thing was, friends of ours got married, and it's like this new world that we're living in for right now. And again, it's just temporary, but it was this awesome experience of watching our friends that we couldn't see getting married, and they were smart enough. They shipped a bottle of champagne to every single guest ahead of the wedding. So I think I drank the whole bottle before they even said their nuptials. And we had this is Nyara and Eric, friends of ours, and Eric is actually a very, very talented cinematographer. He did Mindhunter. So a lot of these people on the right, they're all celebrities from the show. So we were getting drunk and we're watching everyone dancing in the small screen. So we're watching like, you know, the two lead characters of Mindhunter getting wasted, dancing on the camera. It was awesome. So kind of throughout this whole thing, you know, it's Lady Liberty's kind of watching over us all, you know, no matter what, we're all going to be all right. This is going to finish. And I think you all agree, we all love this city. If any of you want to check out more of my work, feel free, Phil Penman or philpenman.com.
Well, Phil, first and foremost, the work is beautiful, and it draws you in with every picture, and it's truly a master class on seeing, composition, storytelling, and it really is. You just don't find that in. There's a lot of people that take photos. There's a lot of people that are very good at taking photos. There are not a lot of people that truly see. And there's something in just hearing you talk. I think everybody here would instantly, beyond your photos, like, that's a guy I just want to sit down and have a beer with and talk to for a while, you know? And
well, let me have a few beers. You might not be there, but I'll still be drinking.
No, but not just that. It's you photograph with such empathy, and the empathy that you say when you speak, it comes through in your pictures. There's so many people, you know, want to take pictures of the homeless like your street furniture, and
like it's like a trophy for the day or whatever it is, right?
But the way you're doing it, it's, you know, in an empathetic way. It you know, it gives them dignity.
Well, you know, that was the one thing was like I showed it to my friend and she was like, finally, a dignified perspective. You know, you like Tommy, the guy, the guy Tommy with the jacket from Bournemouth. He said to me, he's like, we can hear people when we're asleep at night. We can hear them we can hear the shutters going.
Oh, wow.
Like taking pictures of them on the street. And like someone was talking about, you know, how do you approach people or how do you get a picture? And I said, well, most of it's not in the photography. It's actually just in wanting to chat to someone and having a conversation and being engaged and wanting to know about them. Like someone knows if you are with them or you're just trying to think, all right, how can I get the next picture? A lot of the time, like when I'm walking around, I don't photograph people that I chat with because maybe they don't want to be photographed. And, you know, I still see them every day and chat with them. And it was kind of weird because like during the early stages of the pandemic, they were the only people that I could talk with. And you needed this, like we all know we need social interaction. Like it's nice having the Zoom. But I'd spend like an hour and a half with Mitch, man, finding about who's running the 9th Avenue drug gang right now, you know? And he'll fill me in on everything that's going on, and don't go on this corner, and the FBI are doing a sting operation in this area, stay away from there. And you want to know, you know? It's just fun.
So I want to ask you a couple series of questions here. And before I ask you kind of what led you into photography and really kind of what was the spark that like I'm going to be a photographer, were you someone that kind of really sought out and connecting with people before photography, or was it the camera that led you into connecting with people? Which came first?
I think I've always had I guess because of my past, I've done so many different jobs and I've met so many different people from all walks of life, from, you know, the heads of some of the biggest financial companies in the world to working as a street cleaner. And everyone's the same. Everyone has a story. Everyone has problems. Even the guy that makes $6 billion a year, he's got his problems because his wife wants another worker at the house, and how the hell, well, I got to put another person on healthcare. You just want to be engaged in just conversation. I think a lot, it's just like wanting to know about people, and just being, you know, treating them as the same as anybody else. Like it doesn't matter who you are. If you're a dick, you're a dick, you know. That's the way.
Eloquently put. What led you, what kind of like, what were your influences as a kid that kind of led you to photography? Were you someone that just watched films or hung out with your friends out on the street? What was it that what was your influences that led you into all of this?
My mom and my dad. My dad was a photographer. I was brought up I was fortunate enough, like I would see my dad, his prints in the bathtub, you know, being washed, and seeing his black and white work. And then they always took me to like art museums. Like even when I came to New York in '94, you know, they were taking me around MoMA, trying to explain to, you know, dumb 16-year-old that Picasso is pretty good. Or so I always kind of like, I had an art background, and they were exposing me to that. And originally it started off that it was like a backup. You know, I wanted to be a sports teacher, and my dad was like, well, you have to have a backup. And I said, well, I'll do photography then. And he's like, well, I'm not letting you do photography unless you look in this newspaper and you tell me what the best picture is, you know? And that was my qualification. And then as people probably know by now, I was a terrible sports teacher, and I failed my studies miserably, but I did pretty well at photography.
Do you remember early on, was there a photographer or a photo that really just connected with you, that kind of stays with you even to this today, that kind of were like, wow, this is why I'm sort of doing this? And
the work of Arnold Newman, Dwayne Michaels. I believe it or not, it was when I was studying at college, someone had gone and put Arnold Newman artists and Dwayne Michael book on the street, and I found it when I was walking home to my crap dump of a place. And those were the two books that I found on the street, and just I got exposed to their work by that. And then I went to a Sebastião Salgado exhibition, which just blew me away. Those three are like ones that I gravitate to. And then obviously like Richard Avedon, his portraits, he was one that I kind of, just that portrait style. Those were the ones. But like, believe it or not, like, it was mainly a lot of the portrait guys that I was drawn to at first, and then Salgado, and then Cartier-Bresson and these guys, but not as much.
Do you believe in like labeling yourself like I'm a street photographer, or is that something that people put on you? Like if you were to describe yourself as a photographer, are you I'm just a photographer, or what how would you describe yourself?
You have to be careful because it's a marketing thing, and nobody wants to know that you're the jack of all trades. If you're on your website and you have wedding photography, um, street photography, nobody, you cannot possibly be great at every single thing, and nobody wants to hire you that. So I can do all of that work. I've done everything from paparazzi to corporate portraiture to commercial shoots, but I can't have all that on my website. So the street photography was kind of one of the things I started becoming labeled as and better known for. So you run with it.
Yeah.
Better to run with that than try to fight. I'm a terrible fashion photographer. I'm not going to go and pretend that I can do a half-assed job, but I'm not going to go and say that I'm a amazing fashion photographer. And me putting some half-assed fashion pics on my website is not really going to it's not going to get me another gig.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how I fell into it.
So there's an overwhelming response of people wanting to know what you're shooting on and
Who
sort
are
of the
you?
process. Yeah. Who the hell are you? Damn it! Why am I here listening to you? No, honestly, you're there's such a beautiful clarity and a deliberate processing to your photos. People are obviously curious. What are you shooting on? You're doing film, digital, and what are you processing? What's your kind of once you have that street photo, like what are you doing to process it? Are you doing a lot or just a little vignetting? What are you doing?
A little, less is more. Capture One primarily these days. Did a thing with them. Was fortunate enough to be able to try out some stuff with them. Yeah, very
And
little.
camera gear? Are you
Camera gear?
someone that really kind of goes out with one lens and so what camera are you shooting on?
Some people do that, and it's a good way to learn. One lens, like you are the zoom moving back and forth. But if you're a news guy, no chance. You would lose your job the next day. It was always 24 to 70, 16 to 35, 70 to 200. And then back then we maybe had a 300 to 8 for sports events, but none of us could afford 600s or anything like that. It was like the paper would own it and you would just lend it. So when I go and shoot my street work, I look at it from a news photographer point of view. Whereas some pictures work better with a long lens, like the stuff on Fifth Avenue or looking down, you want to show scale, but at the same time, you can't create that same shot with a 24mm lens. You're not going to get that compression. So something like that will work. And then, the portraits, it's 35, I use a 35 Summilux. I shoot a lot of my work with Leica monochrome. Leica SLs for when some clients stupidly ask me for a color picture, yeah, those are my main cameras, and most of these days it's all digital. I do have film cameras, but I don't have the luxury of time anymore with client stuff anyway, at least.
Yeah. So when you actually are shooting color, it has to be something that really demands color, right? Otherwise you're sticking to black and white, or?
Yeah, if I could just shoot everything, it would be probably black and white. I'm more drawn to black and white, I think, because my early days were black and white. If I'm shooting a feature that I know that I'm going to pitch, then I will shoot everything color and most likely edit everything black and white. But, some images work better color, some black and white. I'm not going to shoot purely black and white, because you're missing a lot of great pictures, Don't go one way or the other.
So I have a question here, they ask, I'm an independent photojournalist, self-proclaimed because I've never been published. How can I get published? I really want to share my work. Any advice?
Getting advice, you just got to start approaching people, to be honest. Start hanging up the newspapers. A lot of the time, if you happen to just be the right person in the right spot with that story, they're going to buy it from you. You have to be very careful with how you price yourself, because a lot of the time, if you go in and say, hey, I'll just do it for a photo credit, that editor's not going to use you because they're going to start annoying clients that they have a deal with. So a lot of publications, they'll have subscription deals now where they'll pay maybe $100,000 a month for all that content. And if they start taking free work from some photographer, it might upset their client that is bringing them a lot of work. So you do need to price yourself accordingly. You know, if you get a big exclusive, then value it at that. There's a whole world market for these pictures. If you're pitching it again, you know, if you're trying to pitch a black and white feature, then it's going to be very, very hard. A lot of mine are clients that I've worked with for years, or they're people that I know who just liked my photography and said, hey, I would just love to get your work in my publication. And it's like, you know, the homeless feature, that's not about making money. That's a 2-3 month project that maybe got paid $250 for. That's not about money. That is purely about getting the story out there. And that's a story that I would give to people for free just to get it out there. And then there are the stories, the celebrity, you know, say you go and get a celebrity picture of Brad Pitt with the latest bride or bride to be, that could be a $50,000 picture right now. You know, there's pictures that I've shot years ago that, you know, they were selling for millions of dollars back when I was starting. But you've just got to get out there, just get shooting and start pitching it, you know, and you're going to get a lot of no's and a lot of rejection, but one day there's going to be one that's going to say, yeah, I'll take that. And then they'll take the next, like, you know, the New York Post and guys like that, they're looking for people just to run around all night listening to the scanners and going to news stories. You know, if you want to do that, I'm sure you can go to them and say, I'll do it. You know, there's jobs, there's still work out there.
What's the longest you've actually kind of committed to a project to really make it develop?
Still going on, man.
Keep going, right?
New York City hasn't stopped.
There's some that are ongoing for life, right?
It doesn't stop. There's projects that I have going on all the time. There's 9/11 story that I'm working on, which is 20 years coming on.
Have you embedded yourself into certain situations to get photographs, and to what extent?
Yeah. You know, you get friendly with people. Sometimes it might take a long time before people start relaxing, and then sometimes they gravitate to you straight away. Stories when I've had to be undercover, which is fun.
How often do you find yourself like seeing a location that you wait for something to happen, or are you just kind of waiting for happy accidents, or it's just a mix of just life?
A mix of both. You know, sometimes my patience runs thin. I'm like, God, all right, enough.
What's been one of the most incredible happy accidents, stumbling upon something so far?
Oh God, this was a news story years ago. I was in the office and my journalist said to me, just in case you see this is a lawyer that said he will represent bin Laden if it goes to court. And he said, just in case you happen to see this guy on the street, it's worth a lot of money. And I was riding around Soho and I look into this restaurant and I'm like, oh my God, there he is.
Sitting right there.
He sat right there. And I went up to him and was like, you're the lawyer that said you would represent bin Laden? And he's like, yeah. And I said, would you mind if I do a headshot?
Oh my God.
And I was like, I used to have crazy stuff like that where they would say, can you find this person? And literally like, yep, got him. 3 hours later, and it was just purely because I was just out on the street all day, and you're looking at every single person.
Have you thought of becoming a photographer / bounty hunter, maybe?
Been there, done that.
I don't know if you want to mention, I remember in another presentation you spoke about staking out a place on the Upper East Side, and I won't say the name of the criminal.
Oh, God.
House in and out. I remember you saying a very big story. I don't know if you want to talk about it.
Yeah. Oh God.
Oh God.
Yeah. So big story, Mr. Epstein. Some of you might have heard of him, and nobody had seen him in years, and we had like everyone. There was a bounty on this picture. If anyone saw him, it was a big deal to get this picture. And I know of photographers who had taken pictures of guys who looked like Jeffrey Epstein. So there had been a few problems with that. And I think I was riding up Madison, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, that's him, Epstein. And I was very weary because I knew of stuff that had happened with other pictures. And I knew, like, all right, if it's not him, I'm going to be in a massive lawsuit. So I have like a 200 to 400 on with a 1.4 converter. He's walking with a girl up Madison. I'm hiding like a block and a half away, because a lot of the time you just want to get a picture in the bag. You don't want to be seen anyway, because then they control the shot. So I get this picture, and it's like camera goes away, walk 2 blocks away behind him, and I'm looking just to see if he goes into his house to make sure it's actually Epstein. And it was the first picture of him since he came out of the house arrest. And that was a big deal at the time. But that was an interesting one.
I would say so.
I recently had to photograph his prison guard. One of the guys who had was the suicide watch that used to chat to him. I had to do a portrait shoot with him not that long ago, actually.
And what's that like? I mean, because obviously you kind of want to ask questions, but do you ask these questions and like, it's like, oh yeah, oh yeah,
never gets published, but I want to know. So yeah, no, I do ask questions.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Definitely.
So we do have a question here. When taking photos on the street, is there a limit to how you can use or monetize it? Would you have to get permission from each artist? I saw Pure Genius in your slideshow, and I take a lot of street pics, but I'm hesitant to monetize them because I don't know the boundaries and intellectual property rights.
News, you're covered. Editorial, you're covered. Fine art books, you're covered. You don't need a model release. If you are going to start using them to market a product, then yes, you need a model release, and you will be in a lot of trouble if you don't. And I've seen people try to get away with that stuff as well. I had an agency trying to buy one of my 9/11 pictures, and I told them, look, there's no model releases for this stuff. You can't use this. And they were like, oh, well, no one's going to see it. I'm like, it's one of the most historical events in our modern time. People are going to see it, and they're going to know what it is. Yeah, editorial, though, you are covered. Think about it this way. If you needed to get a model release from every single person, news would cease to exist. You would never see a newspaper or news story ever again. So,
did you happen to read, with all of this going on and all these movements, did you read the Photographer's Bill of Rights?
Here recently?
No, recently they had the Photographer's Bill of Rights that was released that, people were writing up on how you should approach people and shoot people. And a lot of people were signing it with the whole movements and stuff like that. And there was a lot of people agreed with it. A lot of people didn't agree. So I was just wondering if you had read it.
On how you should approach people?
It was a whole thing on basically, part of it, the commotion was actually, it's like you have to get permission from everybody you shoot. And as a news journalist, that's just impossible. And so there was right.
That's what they do. And the only reason I heard that got introduced is because so many people were getting arrested in handcuffs. Yeah. And they were getting photographed, so they changed the laws to suit them.
Yeah, and some of that was all we have.
So if you want to live like that, you go ahead. But like, what happens when it's on the other foot? Yeah. We don't get to decide what's news and what's not. It's just news. And then, if you want to, I have certain things that I stick to with, like a lot of my street portraiture. I go up and ask them because I'm not a big fan of jumping in front of people and blasting them. And that's just like me morally, but that's my own morals. Doesn't mean you can't do that. You have to deal with how you want to work. But no, I think once you start going into censorship, that's a very dangerous path, because then all of a sudden, all the protests, everything that just happened, that wouldn't happen. None of that would have come out. Those videos would never have come out. So it's up to you. Everyone. But I think that's a very dangerous path to go down.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. How is COVID now? Like, what was the transition for you to realizing, like, wow, this is really a lot more than we thought it was? It's not just the flu. And how's it affected your photography, or has it? Are you busier now? Because sort of what you do as a street photographer, you get to shoot anything anyway, so you can kind of go out there, and it's not suddenly like, oh, I gotta do a portrait session. They're not doing portrait sessions, or a wedding, they've canceled all the weddings. You can still shoot, right? So how has it affected your life, or even you as an artist seeing stuff? Like, how's your feeling of the world right now and your empathy level? Do you is it weighing heavy on you right now? Is it like, I can't believe the world is different than anything I've ever seen, and I'm worried about the future? Or where are you at?
I had to tune out a little bit, to be honest. There was a moment where I did crack. It was just like, all right, enough. That's too much. We have our different news channels that it's kind of like, well, it's not really news anymore. It's kind of it's opinion, right? And if you watch one channel, you're told one thing. If you watch another channel, you're told, and it was just like, all right, everything is doom and gloom and you're all going to die. And it was just like, all right, enough. I have to tune out now. I took off to the shore, and I just had to stop watching everything, because what we were seeing on the street and how people were living was completely contradictory to what they were saying. And you have to be very cautious of that. So I tuned out. Work is busier than ever. People have to work, you can't just expect everybody to go homeless, there's ways that we have to work now. There's new precautions with medics. I did a commercial shoot recently where everything has to be sterilized, everyone's got to be separated from each other. Even remote capture now, there's no hovering around a laptop looking at the images. Now it's like, all right, well, how do we figure out live shooting? And I've been going through this today because it doesn't really exist. How do we figure out how a client can see this in Europe at the same time you're shooting? So things have gotten a lot busier because people have got to work.
Yeah, earlier during your presentation, you were talking about basically what you do is, there's a certain point of it, you have to sell it, and there's a monetization of it. And I was talking to Ben Lowy, who was a war journalist at a certain point, and when I was talking to him, I had to do an open talk, which is sort of like inside the actor studio, really kind of diving into the full life of a photographer, their influences. So, and we're definitely doing one with you, brother. But he was saying when he's shooting in wartime, he's like, I'm chasing death, and then that will kind of haunt me forever. But I'm going to shoot death, and that's what I'm kind of doing. Do you have a certain breaking point of like what you will show and won't you show, and or images that you knew that they weren't going to use them how you shot them and intended, and said no, you can't do that? And like, where are your lines, and how do you draw those lines?
That's another question you got to ask yourself: is how is your picture going to be used? You could have shot that picture with certain intentions, like you could have just shot what was going on, but then that picture is now being spun by the one publication into something completely new that you never intended, and now your story has been twisted. And I've had jobs before where like you're hired as an investigator to get dirt on a certain person, and it's a push for whatever political thing that they want to do. And it's like, and you can ask pretty much every news photographer. We've all been involved in this at some point. You've been part of this, and it's, do you feel comfortable doing that? I look at the work of James Nucktway, and I'm like, unbelievable photographer, and I wonder how is his mind not just completely a mess? Like there's no way. I bought Inferno, and I still can't get through that book. And I just look at what he's seen, and I'm like, I would be a complete wreck if I saw that. Yeah, no, it's a question you have to ask yourself. Can you live with it? Like, I know when I shot 9/11 and all that, I had to question myself when I saw these people coming towards me. It was like, all right, can you photograph these people at this hour, you know, when they're at the weakest? And at the same time, it's not, you're definitely not thinking about money. That's the last thing you're thinking about. You're thinking about whether you can even raise a camera. Some people, maybe they can, maybe they're not thinking about it. For me, it was a question I had to ask myself. I kind of had to snap myself out, and I said, well, I came down here for a reason. You know, there's not many of us down here doing this where I was. So I was like, all right, I'm going to shoot this. And then as I shot for a little, like 30, 40 minutes, I started going, bucked up a little bit.
Has there been an image that you went, my God, this is an amazing image, but I just can't put this out there?
Oh yeah. There's, like even some of the homeless stuff, you know, because you look at it and you go, nah, that wasn't right, you know. Like maybe I had a couple of different angles, but you know, I remember putting up a picture, and I think I put it on Instagram, and it's just like, you know, which one do you guys prefer? And it's like, well, the second one, obviously, because on the first one you're looking down on them, and I hadn't thought about it at the time, but it was like, yeah, you're looking down on that person. And it was like it's a mental question I had to ask myself as well. It's like, shit, you know, I didn't even think about it at the time, but by just taking that picture and the perspective, you know, like, oh, what, I'm looking down at you. So like a lot of my work after that was like, you know, I'm very cautious now. Like when I shoot people like that, I make sure I come down to whatever level they are, so we're on the same eye level.
When you're actually out there shooting and kind of doing your thing, is just this muscle memory, and or do you get home sometimes and just look at that photo and just the gravity of it? Like, I didn't experience or feel that, and I'm looking at it and just like have a breakdown moment at certain points when you're seeing something that's like are you present when you're actually taking that photo, or are you just kind of everything's firing on all cylinders and you get home and suddenly like, wow, whoa.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've had images like that where it's kind of like broke me down a bit. The one of Tippy earlier, that definitely got to me.
Yeah.
But again, it's like a shot I took it for a reason. It got a lot of people talking about something that wasn't being spoken about. I was like, great. Well, if I just did that, then that's one good thing that came from this. But yeah, I definitely broke down looking at that.
Have you really kind of ever thought, just one question, and then you, Deb, have you ever thought, like, really kind of broken it down and sat there and go, why do I see differently, or why do I see, and like, what happened in my life that makes me see this way, or what story I'm trying to tell because I see this way? Really, how did you shape your vision as a photographer?
I don't really things. I don't really look at it like that. I'm just like, all right, that's how I see things. But you know, you see things another way, and everyone sees. You know, we might shoot a picture, and then 10 people might take 10 different meanings from that picture, or 10 different stories. You know, maybe it's like, you know, it reminds them of their grandmother, or you know, something. Everyone has a personal thing that maybe I didn't see.
Yeah.
You know,
Deb, what did you have?
I was going to say, you know, in talking about, you know, what to shoot and what not to shoot, or what not to release. I remember Eddie Adams going to hear him speak once, and he said, who shot, I think, 11 wars, or it might have even been more than that, said, he tells a story about being pinned to the ground by gunfire, and he saw an image. He was like face to face with the soldier, and he could have squeezed the shutter, and he said, I know I would have won another Pulitzer Prize. He said, but it would have been wrong. He said, knowing when not to shoot is important as knowing when.
Look at Kevin Carter. You know what he went through. That's a classic example. Like, he took that picture, he won the award, and everyone, first thing they said, well, what did you do to help the kid?
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know much more after that, just from what I read in Bang Bang Club, which is unbelievable. But
Yes.
but yeah, no, I'm sure it's happened to a lot of photographers where you question yourself. You know, I've definitely done it. I know news stories that I've done where I've been involved in where I knew I was being used, and it wasn't for good, and it was like I feel dirty right now because I know what I just got used for. I have friends who were used by the intelligence agencies and they didn't even know it. You know, they got a job for a travel company and to go and photograph a certain spot, and they did the job, and when they went back to the travel company, that travel company never existed and it was never there. It ceased, never existed. And it was like, shit, I just did work for the British intelligence service and didn't even know about it.
One of our viewers, Yvonne, just asked, you were kind enough to ask permission before taking most shots. How do you know when you can shoot freely or when to ask permission?
Depends on what shot you want to get. You have to assess every situation and every person before you even get to them. I don't shoot that much candid, sneaky. You know, I did so much of it with celebrity, but it was different because it was like this big game, you know, where half the time you were getting tipped off by publicists or it was the girlfriend of the celebrity. So I did so much of that. So I'm not going to say that I don't do it, but depends on the picture that you want to get. If it's a person on the street, then a lot of the time I'll ask them because I want to chat with them and I want to capture who they're the character, and I don't want to put them in a certain light.
Say a moment like the gentleman that was painting the street lights. Did you go and grab that shot first, or did you talk to engage him first? Or
I engaged him first. We did a couple of pictures, then we got chatting, and he was filling me in on, yeah, they're doing everything down here. So a lot of the time, you might get chatting with someone, and you take a few pictures, and then you just like kind of let them just relax and get back into their groove again. And that's when you start getting images that look candid. The nice thing with some of these mirrorless cameras is because you can't hear the shutter, you can literally hold it and you can be chatting away and you're shooting away because you're getting the arm movements as they're flamboyantly talking to you, and you're capturing it, but you're doing it in a way that, you know, you're having a conversation.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen some crazy stuff on the street where people literally will just jump in front of people, take a picture, and you see someone go to swing at them, and I'm like, God damn, I couldn't do that. That's
yeah. It's definitely not in my makeup to do that. I'd be scared to get punched in the face or something.
Yeah. One, I was sitting in my car. It was like really early in the morning. There was this famous person who was at the time going through a high-profile divorce, custody battle, drug problem. And this person walked into my field of vision with the two kids and was screaming. Her and the kids were screaming at each other. And I thought I could pick up my camera and take a picture and probably get a nice new apartment out of it. Yeah. But I would have changed their lives, and I couldn't bring myself to do it.
Right.
See, I have a bad problem now with all these mirrorless and EVFs that actually I'm going in to look at a picture or change my focus dot, and people think I'm shooting. I'm like, no, I'm looking in the camera.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, I had one recently where I had to show someone the back of the screen because they were like, oh, you were shooting this. And I'm like, can I have a look if you want? Like, you know? Yeah.
Well, I think that brings us to, wow. And actually, we're almost at the close of our Photo Fest. And I want to thank you so much. And it is raffle time, but I want to thank you so much. And where can people find your work and continue looking at your stuff and the book?
Yeah, well, the book is in MoMA, Photographica, Rizzoli's, on Amazon. Go to Photographica, there's a bunch in there. And then, philpenman.com, or look me up on Instagram at just philpenman.
I can't thank you enough. And
thank you so much.
I want to continue our conversation because there's so much more wealth of information to be had. And it's just wonderful. Anything else from you, Deb, on that?
No, I'm grateful that Phil could join us today, and I think every time I've heard you speak, it's a completely different program.
We are very lucky to have you capturing what you see in your eye with your photographs. So thank you very much. And
thanks so much.